That's beginners. Welcome to Show People, the podcast that shines a spotlight on the UK performing arts industry, covering the latest news, industry issues, what to see and do, and showcasing talent whilst always trying to inform, educate, and entertain. Hello, company. My name is Andrew Keats. I'm a director and your host. Please pull up a chair and join the circle. Now, every episode, I endlessly scroll through my phone book for a special guest to inspire and delight you lovely listeners. But today we don't just have a special guest. We have what I think is a national treasure. She has appeared in countless plays, television series, movies, radios, and dabbles in other art forms too. Please welcome the wonderful Annette Badland.
Hello, you lovely people.
So, yes, Annette has come all the way, and I've got to get this right, all the way from Raxacoricofallapatorius.
Just this morning.
Via Albert Square. Now, coming up in today's show, Annette and I will talk about the importance of content for children on television. We'll be covering the latest dramatic news. There'll be music from composer Chris Patti, performed by Colleen Ballinger, and throughout the show, I'll be interviewing Annette all about her life, her remarkable career, and of course, sending her some infamous Show People challenges too. Welcome to the Show People podcast. Annette, welcome to Show People. Thank you for finding time for me. You've been busy doing things before you arrived here. What were you up to?
I was rehearsing a piece called Plebs, which is a sitcom with three very talented boys. It's in its third series now, and I'm going to guest for them. It's shot in Bulgaria.
Lovely.
So I'm off to Sofia in early October.
At the top of every show, I set my guests a very special Show People challenge. So for the past 2 episodes, I've set Cassidy Jansen and Fra Fee the challenge of delivering their CV within 1 minute.
Oh, come on.
Now, I know your CV, and
I'm very old.
So instead, I've come up with a kinder challenge, I think. I'm not
Thank
going to
you.
expect you to do the whole CV. What we're going to do in a minute, I'm going to mention some of your best-known roles. And I would like you to respond, going back through all of your back history, in character, however you see fit. So that could be a line from the play, from the show. It could be an attitude you have. And we're going to try and cover as many...
I am grimacing now, audience. My little face is all puckered up and scared.
There is a special countdown timer, and we will see just how much. Annette Badland, this is your Show People challenge.
I can remember anything.
I'll make sure I pick ones that you will know, I promise. And there will be one role that I'll talk about later on that there is no point in doing this, which is, of course, the friend in The Rise and Fall of Little Voices. That would be just a sustained period of silence, I imagine.
Well, there were a number of OKs to be said, but they were cut from the film. Mark didn't really understand the concept of them, so they were in the play, but they weren't in the film. But okay. Those that came to see the play used to tell me that in their family, it became a little phrase that they said, okay.
So I have your CV in front of me. 60
Gulp.
second count time. Annette Badland, let's revisit some old friends. Okay, Aunt Babe, EastEnders.
Oh, look, darling, this is my nephew. He's fantastic. Bring up the Rialto.
Mrs. Fitz, Outlander.
Oh, no, Clear. Clear who? A bit more.
Ursula in Wizards vs. Aliens.
My boys, come in.
Judith Bunyan in Father Brown.
Well, she was a brummie, she was. As am I.
Pauline in Snodgrass.
Well, she was a bit of a brummie. She was in love with John Lennon.
Angela Robbins in Bad Girls.
Right, now. I tried for Ray Winston and got Ross Kemp.
Mrs. Ramsbottom, Little Crackers.
Well, she had some sweets and she was very nice to a young boy.
The Slovene in Doctor Who.
You can call me Blon.
Thelma Clegg, Coronation Street.
Hey, come in, lad, and I'll do a belly dance for you.
That's amazing. Now, obviously, as we record this, both Annette and I have GANs on, listening to each other. My teenage self just got goose pimples listening to the laugh of the Slovene over, and I'm hoping if you're cooking dinner, we've caused fear and terror to other people as you do.
Yes, I also have my hand to my forehead just to unzip.
Do you find that children still notice you in the supermarket and
Yes.
start hiding?
I terrify them. If they pursue me for autographs and I'm trying to buy frozen peas or something, they've got me pinioned to the freezer, I just have to lift my hand to my forehead and they scatter.
There are just so many wonderful roles in so many iconic shows.
I've been very lucky, I think. Very lucky indeed.
What are the roles that people often comment on? What are the most loved roles that you find people going, I loved you in this, or you still get fan bases asking about, rather than me going through every single role?
Bergerac was the first long-running teleseries I did, so they still remember that. There was a one-off piece called Last Day of Summer, which is an Ian McEwan story that was adapted. It was a short story, adapted into a screenplay for Film on 4. And that really seems to have affected people. It was a young boy who had been orphaned, lived with his elder brother, who had started a hippie commune in the house. Older brother couldn't deal with him, so invited someone to come and sort of nanny him and a little baby. And initially the little boy didn't want to know my character, thought if he was in the same room as me or shook my hand, he might get fat. And he didn't want that. And then, of course, we ended up having the most glorious time together. And it's from a book called First Love, Last Rites.
Right.
And it was a first love for both of us. I'd been accepted by him. He had someone he could relate to. And, of course, the little girl got in the way. He was quite jealous of her. And we had this glorious summer on the Thames boating. And then eventually I died. So I actually had a tweet from someone just yesterday saying, it's the last day of August. I have celebrated by watching Last Day of Summer.
How wonderful.
Which is fantastic.
What are the ones that people still come up to you, as my friend did the other day at the Groucho Club when we were there putting the world to rights?
Happy Families is a huge success with the late 30s now and early 40s. I get handsome young men running towards me, embracing me, and then they say it was because they ran home from school and watched Happy Families. Demon Headmaster. Oh, gosh, so many things I've done. Jack and Nori, You and Me. Wizards versus Aliens is more recent. I've just got a long list of children's television under my goggle eyes. And I think it's terribly important to have good storytelling. Terribly important.
Hello, my dears. You have the ineffable and probably undeserved pleasure of listening to the Show People podcast with Andrew Keats. This is Stephen Fry wishing you a wonderful listen. Thank you.
Thank you for those kind words, Mr. Fry.
Stephen!
Kindest man
yes,
in
he's
the
wonderful.
world.
Yeah.
We don't work in a perfect industry, of course we don't. So every episode, I like to ask my guest if there are any industry issues that we should explore in this part of the show that I call the soapbox. Now, hopefully we can find ways to cope with things that aren't fair, or in the best case scenario, by talking about them, actually initiate some kind of change. Now, before today's show, Annette and I were talking about what riles her and what she's passionate about. And like we said in the first section, talking about the importance of the work that she's done and how it's influenced children. Annette has, believe it or not, been speaking in Parliament about an issue that's very important.
That was a bit scary.
So, what have you been lobbying people to do? What have you been up to?
Save kids' content.
Absolutely.
We don't make enough homegrown product for our kids. And they sit and watch American animation and end up with American accents and respond to American culture, which is fine if it's a strand. But we need to make our own product so that our kids have something they can really relate to and relates to their own lives. The BBC make most of our children's programmes now because with the changing laws about not advertising sugary drinks and sugary products, the commercial stations decided, well, we're not going to make any money out of this. Why should we make product for them? So they no longer invest in children's programs. The Beeb does, but its kind of remit is much reduced. As I said, I did Jack and Nori. Jack and Nori doesn't exist anymore. You have CBBC's bedtime story. And that's the only kind of storytelling you have. So Anne Wood, who was a co-creator of Teletubbies, found that her 6-year-old granddaughter said to her, "Can I have a glass of water?" And she said, "No, you can have a glass of water." And it just triggered something in her. She knew that she had to do something about it. Fluella Benjamin's in on the act and spoke very well. And we're just trying to get Ofcom to either give initiatives to companies or quotas that they have to abide by. But it can't, the onus cannot just be on the BBC to produce product for kids. And they need it. And they love stories. Stories are so important. The Happy Family scenario. It was good writing by Alan Ahlberg. And that generation ran home from school to see it. We worked as a rep company, so we changed roles. And, one time you'd have a small part, another you'd be the lead in it. But it made us joyous. We were very happy to tell the stories. And the audience responded. We no longer have that wonderful Sunday afternoon classic series, Great Expectations, or, a classic piece of literature interpreted for the screen for a family to sit round and watch. And I know watching is different, and we all know that. We all know kids will access it differently, but the product should be good. I'm on my soapbox. I've got up here very high.
I knew it would work.
I'm about a foot off the ground.
But how wonderful, how important it is, because, of course, I'm a man of the theatre, and indeed, I know you've worked in the theatre countless times, but, that is the medium that is reaching children. It's those listening, we have another appearance.
The wondrous Toby.
Toby Page is...
and he's nuzzling me, everyone.
He is the most showbiz cat in the business. Yes. It's interesting, not only from the producer's point of view in regards to creating content for children, but also does it frustrate you, particularly as somebody who was so active in children's television, when artists and directors look down upon these children's series and go, "No, I don't want to make that. I don't want to be involved in these children's stories."
It's an arrogance that's unfounded, because if you don't tell children good stories and you don't engage them, what does that say about the adult they become? And it's not just kids telly. Famous people have said to me, "You've got to stop doing that. You really have to stop doing that children's television." But I found the people in it, the producers and directors, the most imaginative, creative people I probably ever worked with, because they were dedicated to their audience. They had to take great care of them. They had to consider... in Wizards, we had a very dark scene where one of the young boys was going to die if I didn't manage to get the right spell. But within that, you also had to think about the little 5-year-old alone on the sofa, the little girl whose mom wasn't around. So you had to be very caring of your audience. And I think that has to be respected. And I think, as I say, those children are going to become adults. And if you don't put good stuff in, you're not going to get good stuff out. And you're not going to make them imaginative and creative. And they don't have art programs, how to stick something together or mix paint. I just think it's so short-sighted. I believe Netflix have realised, and they're starting to do children's product, because they know what they're trying to do, of course, is grow a loyalty base and an audience for the future. Why not? If you can do it with good product, then go ahead.
It's interesting as well how, obviously, people that end up working in television or end up working in the theatre, nearly everybody that works in it was influenced as a child by something extraordinary that they saw. Often when I'm lecturing or teaching at drama schools, I ask the question, what was your first experience of the theatre or storytelling? And often people say, I went to a pantomime, or I saw the Joseph tour. And I always say, well, that may be the case, but probably the very first time you experienced the very foundations of theatre was when you had, an uncle or an auntie that would hide behind the sofa or the breakfast bar and pop out, and you as a kid would clap your hands, and be thrilled to see them, and then they'd disappear. You go, what the fuck? Where have you
What's
gone?
happening now?
Where have you gone? And then they'd peek out and go, peekaboo. And then, of course, rapturous applause. And within that tiny moment, you experience beautiful storytelling, two emotions in such a short amount of time. And I wonder, what are we piping into children now that's going to make them want to become television producers of the future, that's going to want to make them actors, directors, you name it?
Well, I think certainly with animation, you can be divorced, and a lot of our lives are divorced now. We're separated from a lot of things. And but if you can tell a good story, then they will be engaged with it, and it will make their imaginations more fertile. And it can only grow and change from that. I didn't. I come from a working class family. We didn't have books. There was a copy of the Bible and maybe a car manual or two.
The Argos catalogue.
I don't know that Argos happened then. It would be sort of Woman's Weekly and I used to skate with my dad once a week and pick up the next episode of The Knowledge, which was a sort of build-your-own encyclopedia. So television was and I was an only child. So storytelling was done for me via the television. Toby's now climbing all over the table, all over the equipment.
Toby Page.
And he's a bit cross not to be included.
Toby, we'll interview you when we get Andrew Lloyd Webber on the show, and we'll talk about cats. Why did you choose to ignore when people who will not be named, but well-known colleagues said, Annette, you mustn't do children's television? Why did you decide to stick with it, particularly as a much younger actress? Was it you didn't care about what people thought about you, or was this issue important right at the very beginning?
I think because I had enjoyed it so much. And it clearly gave, from the response we got, people engaged with it. And isn't that what we're meant to be doing as actors? And my career has been varied. So there was, it was, I'd be at the National at the time someone was saying this to me. So I saw no stigma. That's the big thing, I guess. There used to be a stigma about being in front of the camera in ads as well. Actors who would be very happy to take a very large sum for the voiceover would not be seen in front of the camera and would decry the people who were, which again, I just thought, this is ludicrous. It's you're lying to yourselves. And the people that were saying to me, you must give up this kids' telly stuff, were then in Harry Potter. Or, you think, all right, if the salary's larger, and they'd say, well, it isn't just for children and all the rest of it. But I've been in the Spartacle Mysteries, which was young actors, children and young actors, and I was the only adult. And then I've just done The Dumping Ground. And again, they used children and a few adults. And I think that's very good for children to relate to. When we all met at Parliament, we all of us involved who had been performers had stories to tell of people coming to us and saying, you were important in my life as a child. And I think if children at home see other children going through problems that they have, experiencing things they experience, it can only help. Children then see other human beings. I mean, in Dumping Ground, there are people with disabilities. There were in both programs, but they see a human being dealing with something. They don't see a condition. And therefore, when they meet a child with that condition, they're Fred or they're John. They're not something strange. And
do you think there's any cause for actors especially to worry that they then might have their career affected. That there might be roles that perhaps they won't get because they're too synonymous, say, with a hit children's TV series. So actually, do you know what? That role for you in at the National
Scandi drama is not going to happen. But that's so throughout the profession. We all get put into boxes. We all, they try and stream us into what they've seen us do last. Whatever work we do, we're going to be pigeonholed. It's inevitable.
I think what's also fascinating, I suppose, again, from a theatre point of view, there are some really extraordinary, wonderful little theatres that I just relish any opportunity to get along to. For example, the Polka Theatre, which is just up the road from where I live in Wimbledon, is the most magical little theatre for kids to go and see stories that are written specifically for them. And I know every actor that I've ever spoken to, and certainly every director and writer that has worked there, says it's a magical time because you know that you're the person or you are the team that are introducing theatre to the one thing that we love most of all. There's the Lion and the Unicorn Theatre, for example, which does these tremendous interpretations of things like Cinderella, where they'll put her in Dr. Martin boots and make her a punk, and kids love it.
But isn't that a tremendous gift? Talking about people who decry it, it's a wonderful, wonderful gift in your life. It's just tremendous. What you get back is extraordinary.
It's the kids that go to the pantomimes or go to the children's shows that ultimately in 30 years' time are the same kids that go to the National, that go to the Globe, that go to their local theatre. And I suppose the same must be said of those that are seeing television, and not just influencing those that are going to work there, but of course most children's stories are tiny morality plays.
Yes.
You were telling me the story about, again prior to this, about things like Wizards versus Aliens and some of the issues that you guys covered. What were they?
Oh, gosh, euthanasia. How do you interact with other human beings? What is morally correct? A conundrum of, should I kill this person or not? How, where is my level of tolerance for another human being or another creature? And what happened was that I know from the feedback, people would start to discuss these things because we didn't come to a finite conclusion. It was left open so that the audience then had to think for themselves how they would respond, and you'd have a family discussing it. And, I know I'd squash them. No, you wouldn't. You shouldn't do that. Yeah. And parents saying it was absolutely fantastic that they went off on this journey together, and then the parents could join in too, and it became a family discussion, and just amazing things. I mean, Russell T Davies, who also regenerated Doctor Who, he has tremendous care of his audience and wants very much, he's a huge man physically and in personality, and takes enormous responsibility whilst relishing the drama and the colour of everything and the naughtiness and the humour. He also is very principled about his audience and what he's saying to them.
So I would love to know what you guys think at home. So if you would like to get in touch, please tweet me using the handle @AndrewKeats, or tweet the show using @ShowPeopleUK or #ShowPeoplePodcast. You can send us an email to info@arian-productions.com or via the Show People Facebook page at facebook.com/ShowPeoplePodcast, where you can also talk with other listeners to the show and perhaps share your views. What do you think? Do you think it's fine that kids can watch American TV? Do you think we don't need it? Or do you think it's vital that we keep funding it? What were your favourite TV shows? What were the shows that influenced you that perhaps have influenced your career today? Okay, here's a little message from a very special friend.
Hello, this is Steve First, and you are listening to the Show People podcast with Andrew Keats. A man so marvellous, he's putting bums on seats. Whether it be parakeets eating halal meats or premier athletes submitting VAT receipts. It's the Show People podcast with Andrew Keats.
Thank you, Steve. First, you silly sausage. I love that when I asked Steve if he wouldn't mind recording something, he sent me a poem, which of course,
Yes,
poetry is such a passion of your life.
Yes, I adore poetry. Well, I think it's the essence of things. It's refined down to our feelings and emotions, and it's, a little crystal. Writing poetry's about refinement, I think, and distilling, and I just enjoy it enormously.
Let's start at the very beginning.
It's a very good place to start.
And I'd like to know, Annette, where were you born and where did you grow up?
I'm a Brobay. My mum was a Scot. I grew up in Birmingham. Edgbaston. I was born in Small Heath, grew up in Edgbaston. Our garden backed onto the cricket ground. And I was there until I was 12, and then we moved out of town, and I fell in love with acting on Parents' Day when I was 10, and my class got to chant a poem called Meg's Merrilies, and I got to enact her, and I felt the audience for the first time. And as I say, I was an only child, and also, although I was in a city, grew up in quite an isolated way. I had the little girl next door was 5 years older. So when I was 5, she was 10, and that's a huge difference. So I hadn't really got people to play with until I went to school. So then finding that I could influence an audience and make them laugh and make them stop laughing, that was quite an experience and a little gem that I put in my pocket. And then we moved out of Birmingham. I took drama lessons. Well, I was in the school drama group, and then started to take drama lessons for myself, spent my pocket money on that. I couldn't do National Youth Theatre because my parents didn't have enough money. I couldn't travel. It was a good 10, 12 miles to get to the nearest centre for that, and also you had to go away for the summer and things, and we just couldn't do that. So I was never in the National Youth Theatre, but went along to my drama teacher and handed over my pocket money and did LAMDA external exams.
Who was your drama teacher? And
Mrs. Jarams,
right?
who drove a little Mini. And as I say, she was a school teacher and said she would on Saturday mornings come and collect. Well, she didn't. I travelled on a bus, and then she used to come and collect me from the bus stop. And she was very correct, still quite young, but had been nicely brought up and was quite correct and about everything she did and quite precise. But I do know her now as Sheila. And that's very odd, having someone who was a Mrs. Jarams to you and then becomes a human being in your later life. It's very odd. And there was Mrs. Platten, the English teacher as well, who's Shirley, and I like her very much too. And outside of school, there was Mrs. Snelling. And Mrs. Snelling used to do mime. And we, on Saturday mornings when I went for classes with her, because Mrs. Jarams eventually had to stop teaching me for private reasons, and so I went to Mrs. Snelling, and she would have little tight leggings on and had done mime, and looked at her fingernails a great deal when she talked to you. And it's a character trait that I've wanted to use and haven't yet, but she didn't really look at you very much. She was looking at her nails and thinking about things all the time, and then she'd pass on a little gem about mime and acting the king. And as I say, she always prepared with her little leggings and a sweater. So that was quite, I suppose all these people opened doors to a different life for me. There'd been a teacher in my life when I was 7, Miss Bateman. And she was the first person, she took me home, and I saw a library in her house for the first time. And we sat and ate together, and she had napkins and dabbed the corners of her mouth, and I didn't know about any of these things. So she opened me up to books. And I guess although I say I felt the audience with the Parents' Day, Miss Bateman's class, I do remember one day waiting in line to hand in my homework, and got bored waiting. We were all standing in a long line. And I started to pretend I was in a bus queue and putting my hand out, and was it raining, and sort of looking at the other people, and was the bus coming, and making the class giggle. So I guess that might have been my first public performance. I'm not sure. I was a chatterbox. I don't think I was attention-seeking, but I was. That girl at the back, stop talking.
And how did that transition go from being a chatterbox, as it were, all the way through to actually, no, I want to train as a professional actress? And how did that occur?
The reason I took those Saturday morning classes was because I wanted to know if I could do it or not. That was my testing ground. That was, can I do this? It's not just because those people in the WI recognise me, because I was invited into the WI to play a young part. It's not just because I'm available and they recognise me that they're asking me to do this. Can I do this? Mrs. Snelling, the independent teacher, was the one who guided me towards East 15. And I think she felt that this sort of little oddity from the Midlands would fare better in that environment than trying to apply to RADA. I only know that when I went to East 15, they auditioned you for a whole day. And I just loved it and felt it was my home. I had other interviews. I had one with Central, but I just decided I wasn't going anywhere else. And if they accepted me, that's where I wanted to be. And it just felt right. And the improvisation, and they had us in the theatre performing our pieces in front of everybody else. It wasn't a sort of closed, scary table of people judging you. It was a whole group of people you could entertain or not, test your ability.
What lengths did you and your family go to fund your training? Because, of course...
I have a memory of a Tupperware box arriving with a salad, very soggy, beaten up salad in it, saying, we were just eating this and we were enjoying it so much and thought you would like to share. And of course it was beaten to death. It was hopeless. But I would make a big pot of soup at the beginning of the week and it would last, 4 or 5 days. That was how you existed. We'd go to markets, we'd pick up cheap bits of meat. We had a tutor who would take us to Smithfields very, very in the middle of the night, between Friday and Saturday, and we'd pick up things we could do, terrible ham hocks that we could boil for, hours and get something out of. I was lucky. I mean, a grant does make an enormous difference. I got a bursary. I got a local bursary which bought all my fencing equipment and some other things. And I always worked in the holidays. I got my equity card in my first break. I was very lucky. Went off to do weekly rep in Southwold as an acting ASM and did absolutely everything. On the first night, I'd be speaking more than the actors because it was weekly rep, so I'd be feeding them their lines all the time. I had a bit of a crush on the leading man, so I'd go around on a Sunday and help him with his lines.
You vixen, you.
That never got anywhere. After having read the sermon in the church, which I also quite liked, I was invited to get up and read from the pulpit and everything. So I'd go and do that, and then Sunday afternoons I'd be off round to the leading actors to help him with his work. But it did mean that I left drama school with my equity card, a provisional equity card, which in those days was a catch-22. You needed a card to get anywhere, but you needed work to get a card. So I was very, very lucky. An actor I was who was in my year, Peter Durkin, sent me a telegram saying, female acting ASM dreadful, bring own cap and apron. So off I went to Southwold for the season, and it was fantastic. And I got to play the maid in Private Lives as well and say mère.
And indeed you have been in shows where you do time travel, but if you could time travel and go back and give a very young Annette Badland any advice, what would you say?
Don't be afraid. Don't be curtailed by your fear. Just do it.
Thank you. We'll be discussing what Annette would then go on to do after this little message.
Hi, this is Robert Duncan McNeil, and you're listening to the Show People podcast with Andrew Keats.
Now, it's that time of the show that I like to call Dramatic News. Sir Peter Hall, the founder of the Royal Shakespeare Company and former National Theatre Director, has died at the age of 86. Sir Peter founded the RSC at the age of just 29 in 1960 and led the company until 1968. He became director of the National in 1973 and was responsible for the theatre's move from the Old Vic to the purpose-built complex on the South Bank. After leaving the National Theatre in 1988, Sir Peter formed the Peter Hall Company and in 2003 became the founding director of the Rose Theatre Kingston. Throughout his career, Sir Peter was also a champion of public funding in the arts, as well as directing countless iconic productions, including the English-language premiere of Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot and the world premiere of Harold Pinter's Homecoming. Rufus Norris, current artistic director of the National Theatre, said, "We all stand on the shoulders of giants, and Peter Hall's shoulders supported the entirety of British theatre as we know it. From everyone at the Show People podcast, our thoughts are with his family and all those that knew him." The RSC has announced its new season, which will feature productions of Macbeth, Romeo and Juliet, and The Merry Wives of Windsor. Doctor Who star Christopher Eccleston will make his RSC debut in the Scottish play in the Royal Shakespeare Theatre, directed by Polly Finlay, who will also star alongside Niamh Cusack as Lady Macbeth. Fiona Laird will then direct a production of The Merry Wives of Windsor. Fresh from his acclaimed Titus Andronicus, David Troughton will take on the role of Falstaff, and Anthony Sher will reprise his King Lear for a limited revival of Gregory Doran's production, which returns after its run in the RST and at the Barbican last year. In the Swan Theatre, there will be productions of John Webster's The Duchess of Malfi, directed by Maria Aberg, and Mary Picks's The Fantastic Follies of Mrs. Rich, directed by Joe Davis. Erica Wyman will direct a new musical by Sam Kenyon called Miss Littlewood, about revolutionary theatre maker Joan Littlewood. On the season, Gregory Doran said, "All shows in the main house in Swan are directed by women. That was part of a process. It just so happens that it's an entirely female-directed programme." And finally, Five Guys Named Mo has extended its run at the pop-up Marble Arch Theatre in London. The musical, directed by Clark Peters, is now booking until February the 17th, 2018. This section of the Show People podcast has been recorded after the interview with Annette Badland. No doubt, Annette would have wanted to have expressed her sincere sympathies to the family and friends of Sir Peter Hall.
Hi, I'm Alexis Gerard, and you're listening to the Show People podcast with the brilliant Andrew Keats. And I mean that, and not just because he slipped me a cheeky 20.
So, Annette, let's look at that time after East 15. What were those early first jobs, and what were you doing to keep the wolf from the door as well? What were those experiences like?
Hungry wolf. I've always been very fortunate, and I did send lots and lots and lots of letters, I have to say. But I went into the Actors Company, which was Ian McKellen's kind of drive to turn the tables, and the actors employed the directors. So we did 3 plays. I was only enacting ASM. They promised me that I would take over from Felicity Kendall because she was very pregnant in the Fado farce, and Felicity would not give that part up. She played it to the bitter end. So I never got to go on as the little French maid. Though I did play the hotel prostitute and had a very tight bustier and peignoir, black net peignoir. And the other female ASM that I was with to this day calls me Boobs or Boo Boo, which is very embarrassing when you're on holiday in Egypt with a group of people and she's saying, "Come on, Boobs, come on over here." So Actors Company, then one of my tutors at East 15 was doing Toad of Toad Hall at Lancaster. So I went off to play Mole, which I'm very proud of because usually it's men. So I got to play Moley in Toad of Toad Hall, and then into the RSC, doing things like Audrey and As You Like It and Hostess in Shrew and Lady Montague and things like that. So.
What was the RSC like at that time? What were the really standout productions where you learnt the most, and what were the things that you learned?
Well, I was with a young director, Buzz Goodbody. So I was part of a sort of new refreshment of the RSC. David Suchet was in the company. And it was a time of change for it. It was, early 70s. Design was good, strange, sort of innovation there. So the whole company was changing. Sis Berry was there, who is just phenomenal as a voice coach and very maternal and absolutely fantastic to work with. Trevor Nunn was the artistic director. Terry Hands I worked with. David Jones was a wonderful director, but I didn't do Shakespeare. Well, did I do? Yes, I did do Shakespeare with him, but did Summerfolk, did a Gorky play, and it was in flux. It was highly coloured, but it was a building that was changing and had to change really, and loosen up and become more open. And they were starting that with Buzz, as I say, and then slowly the other place was starting to happen, and innovation. Then the Swan was built. It just was changing slowly. And now it has. And we also played at the Aldwych we came into, which was fabulous, of course. Wonderful theatre. And we went back there with Little Voice. We played Little Voice at the National and then at the Aldwych, so that was great to revisit there.
It's a wonderful credit to ask you. I've been very fortunate to spend time with Jim Cartwright and, of course, his gorgeous, wonderful son, James Cartwright. Obviously, doing Passing By with James and meeting Jim on the press night of the show. So I must ask, The Rise and Fall of Little Voice is, of course, such an iconic standout production, and indeed an important production for its time. Please tell me about it, and please tell me about your. And I do know
it's poetry that's seeming reality. Yeah. Jim was called Jim Can't Write at school. He struggled with writing at all, and he wrote something that was so beautiful and intricate. As we said earlier, I think I had 10 okays in one sentence, but I went from someone the audience laughed at to laughing with and having empathy for. It was, the lines were just glorious that other people had to say, just fantastic stuff. Silly things, Mari saying to her daughter who doesn't want to go out, well, if you're agoraphobical, you can get out. Just lovely stuff to relish. And Sam Mendes directing. We did lots of research. We went up north and we went to a club and, the shutter went up and pies were called and the whole audience of the club runs to the door to, the shutter door to get their pies and things. So we immersed ourselves in it. And Jane was, I don't know if the audience will know, Jane had been in Road and sang along with the music for the interval and everything. And Jim cottoned on that she could really do it. Jane says she can't sing unless she's trying to be someone else. She's changing now and she's creating her own work and singing for herself and fabulously as well. But at the time she said she could only do it if she was channeling through other characters. So you got Judy Garland and just wonderful stuff. Pete Postlethwaite was in it as Race. And we had the most phenomenal time, really, to be in front of an audience, to have a play that would make an audience literally laugh, helplessly and cry, and then to a man get up and applaud it every night, and to be the recipient of that is extraordinary, to be involved with something like that, Stick.
Of course, what may sound unusual to some of our listeners, going from the 1970s certainly through to the 1980s and 90s, of course, television completely transformed as well. And obviously you were part of generations where there were no books on technique about how to use, these essentially
None
new
at
art
all.
forms. So tell me,
It's terrifying. It still is.
I mean, obviously, there wouldn't have necessarily have been classes like perhaps younger generations enjoy.
Absolutely nothing.
I mean,
no television technique whatsoever. And East 15, we didn't have radio technique. We didn't have anything. We were meant to go out and start our own theatres. It was theatre-based, and you started your own company and you toured, or you said whatever you needed to say was their ethos. So I was a sort of oddity anyway, that I came out and went straight into very legitimate theatre. But no, we weren't. You just learn from other people, and not actors necessarily. Technicians will help you, or you see Michael Caine's masterclass about, looking your left eye to the other person's left eye and turning to the camera and all that sort of thing. So it came slowly and was very scary, and I still feel that I am massively large for a screen a lot of the time, or I don't do anything. I just button down and but you just have to go with the moment. When it's really good, you just perform with the people around you, and it happens. You forget. You have to have some technique, but if your story's good and the people you're working with are good, then it happens anyway.
Have there been any times when you were working where actually between jobs it seemed too hard? Did you ever think about not working in this industry?
No.
Never?
Every day. I'm going to give this up. I'm going to stop. It's always difficult. That's also part of my personality. If you're not doing it, it's difficult. If you are doing it, it's difficult. And I always feel I can't do it and I'm hopeless and, I'm just not getting it or understanding it. Or it's always a struggle for me. But that's also part of the relish, because I'm always trying to unpick it or find a bit more or research something. So that all feeds into it, this big melting pot, and then something eventually bubbles up. I can't say that I ever truly thought I'd walk away from it because I wasn't getting work. I get angry now with where the business is going, television and things, and how we are treated, and the lack of collaboration and respect for actors. Even getting in the door. I don't know if people know about self-taping, which has happened. I've been locked away in a soap for a few years, so when I went in, it wasn't really it wasn't happening, and when I came out, it was. And I don't respond well to it, I'm afraid. I'm not very not very good at it, and find it insulting. Yes. And I know I've got to accept it. It's part of the business, and we have to do it. But I just feel like a little spider on the end of a bit of string, and I don't know why I'm dancing. I just think, isn't it better if we all collude and conspire and share and, know what we're all trying to achieve, rather than just being sent a couple of pages of something and being told to learn them in a day and tape them yourself? Well, I'm afraid I would like a full script. I would like to... I'm on another soapbox now.
I was going to say.
I would like a full script. I would like to be told... I come from a day when we used to go and meet a director, and you would read several scenes, and they would say, that's great, but have you thought it could also be, or, I love that bit, but what about this being about that? And you go, oh, right, and you try that, can you try that? Great. And things grow and change, and then you would have a conversation and give them something that they didn't anticipate from it. And they go, oh, right, whoa, yes, okay. And now we're sent, I've been asked, I haven't done many self-tapes, and maybe that's, I will get better at it, but I've been sent 6 scenes to learn in a day because they want to see the part. And you feel the people receiving it don't really know what they want. But I could do a scene one way, or I could do it another way. I could be a very, horrible crosspatch, or I could be laughing about something. Both perfectly valid.
I hate self-tapes, and I really do. And they're becoming...
You're taking me down off my soapbox.
No, I'm not. I'm absolutely standing next to you on it. I absolutely hate them. Again, especially from a theatre point of view, where because somebody's agent perceives their client as a bit of a name, and I have to say, most of the time, it's those that are not a name in any way, shape or form that just can't be asked to do an audition that offer this, which is where they'll do themselves such a disservice and not want to come in the room. They'll send these often terribly filmed self-tapes with awful audio, and so much of theatre is about the voice.
Yes.
How do you think a tiny, often rubbish microphone on an iPad is going to give any actor the justice of their craft? And gosh, I mean, there's that old adage, isn't it? You know, if you want to cast someone from the moment they walk in through a door. Do you know what, there's truth in that? And I would rather have, when deciding a play or a musical or whatever, that even playing field, when people walk through that door, what they walk out, it's what they do in between those two moments. Yes. And also, if it's a tour, if it's a long-running show, I want to know that I'm going to have some kind of relationship with this actor. That audition is the opportunity to be the first day of rehearsal. Yet, a 3-minute, badly filmed iPad video, it must be quite comforting for some actors, who do have DSLR cameras or iPads or whatever, knowing that they can edit their very best performance. But there's no sense of, for example, when we met, theatre and other projects are about collaboration. And like when we met, when you've got a connection with someone, and when you haven't. And
you speak the same language.
Yeah.
Or you view the world differently, or
just wanting to be near that person again.
Yeah.
And I do think, gosh, the glow of an iPad versus the shake of a hand, or someone fucking up their lines, for example, and how they respond to that. Do they kill themselves in the moment, or do they laugh and go, well, that wasn't very good? It says volumes about somebody, and I can't stand them. Well, listeners, what do you think? Do you love self-tapes? Are they super convenient, or do you loathe them like Annette and I do? Now, this is the part of the show that I like to call The Platform, a springboard to give exposure to an artist that our listeners might not necessarily have heard of. Chris Patti is a West Midlands-based composer and vocal coach. His album, Self-Taught Still Learning, was released in 2011 and reached number 2 in the Amazon Broadway charts as being a bestseller at Dress Circle. Chris's most popular work is a song he and his writing partner Amy wrote for Chloe Hart called Stagey and Proud. This went on to be performed by Sheridan Smith at the What's on Stage Awards. Today's song, composed by Chris, is performed by Colleen Ballinger, who is better known to the world as superstar wannabe Miranda Sings, and she recorded this song at Lowfish Studios in New York. Worthy is a song about knowing your self-worth and recognising it in others. Too often, we judge ourselves by how others treat us and not by the insight of our own actions. Here's Colleen Ballinger with Chris Patti's Worthy lyrics.
Walking in the dark, I have no light to guide my way, yet I feel you there, beside me, around me, within me. The times that I've been lost, days where my heart stood still, you were there holding my hand, and I knew that this was forever with you. By how insecure he always made me feel, unworthy of his love, and I find myself unworthy of your love. I don't want to live another day without you by my side, and you at last I found a way to face the light and never hide, protected by you, loved by you. I know that I'm now worthy. I wouldn't blame you if you left. You don't deserve a girl who can't even say those 3 words for fear of rejection. It's stupid, I know. Please don't think I'm weak. I've always been the kind of girl who always doubts herself. Am I smiling? Did I say that? Does he love me? I don't want my past to tell me who I am or who to trust. I want to live and breathe my life, not be a slave to what's gone before, to know myself, trust myself. I know that I'm now worthy, and now it comes to this, and this is where I stand, fighting with my heart, my future's in my hands. It's time to say just how I feel. I love you. I love you. I love you. I know that I'm now worthy.
Well, if you enjoyed that, why not check out Chris Passi's brilliant album, Self-Taught Still Learning. It can be found on iTunes, Amazon and Spotify, and can also be purchased physically by getting in touch with Chris through his Facebook page, Chris Passi Music, or on Twitter at Mr. Chris Passi. Now, are you a composer, a songwriter, or a playwright? Have you written something that you're able to send me as a recording? Please do get in touch, as I love sharing new work with our listeners. You can get any work to me by emailing info@arian-productions.com, and maybe the Show People podcast can champion your work in the next episode.
Hi, this is David Bedella, and you're listening to the Show People podcast with Andrew Keats.
But those not in the room, Toby Page is now attacking some XLR cables. So, Toby, no.
You hear fizzling. It's Toby effect.
He is a terror. Now, you've recently, for 2 years now, I think, been appearing in the great British soap that is EastEnders. What is it like? What's it like working on such a big, regular show?
It's a huge machine. And I used to say it teaches you humility because you're a very small cog in this big machine. Days start at 7. If you're a woman with a lot of makeup, you can be 6:45, but normally it's 7. The day starts filming at 8, and you do a 12-hour day. Because I was a subsidiary character, I wasn't there every day, but someone like Danny Dyer or Kelly Bright, the main players will be there more than they're with their family. There is a great camaraderie because you do have this second family. I still have my Carter family, and we're all connected because you do spend so much time together and involved in the same stories and the same, growing the same emotional story and the same line and reacting to scripts, good or bad, and going, this is rubbish, get it done quickly, or this is fantastic, I wish there was more of this. You drive yourself to work, which I found used to turn my stomach every day because the responsibility of being there on time. I think often people think that actors have a very easy, kind of loose, late life, and we're not. For the most part, we have to be very careful and businesslike. And so I used to allow twice as long as it took to get there, just to make sure I'd be there. And it was better to have a coffee when you were sort of sitting in your dressing room than being stuck on the M25 and panicking and holding a whole studio up. Everyone works very hard, not just the actors. I mean, all the camera crews are working tremendously hard, and the pace of it is fast. You go onto the floor, you'll have a line run. You might have a second line run, depending on the director or how badly the first line run went. Then you get up on your feet, and the director will say, I'd like you to come in from here and go over there, and this person's going that way. And you might get one physical rehearsal, and then the cameras are on it. And if it works technically, then, you're going to be moving on.
Did you manage to get any input into the character itself in regards to the writing, or are you just fed by the writers and it's up to you to make it work?
It varies. When Dominic Treadwell-Collins asked me to become part of the show, we talked a lot then about the character and that she would be Dickensian and different strands and aspects of her character. But like life, it evolves. And often, because the writers have seen you play something, they will then start to write that. And probably, and a number of the writers will respond. So then you have a whole tranche of work that is, coloured pretty much the same. And certainly as an actor, I like, if I'm a baddie, I like to find the gentle points. And if it's someone very gentle, you find the other side of them, because we're all very different as human beings, and we're different with different people. Different strands of our personalities kind of emerge. So I like to do that with my characters, but you find that the writers write what they see. And I think I turned, because when I first started, Babe was not particularly a villain or difficult, but I had one scene with Tim West, whom I had loved in the past, and he'd been stolen away from me, and we were alone together, and he was looking at the television, and I took the remote control and I turned the television off, and I told him very quietly, leaning over the arm of the sofa, what I thought of him, and threatened him a little bit because I'd been very hurt by him, and then put the telly back on at the end. And I think that was probably the turning point for the writers, who thought, oh, right, she can do this, she can get cold and threatening. We'll write a lot of that. But I always, when people say, oh, she's horrible, and I used to say, well, she was never loved. That was my basis. She was someone who'd never, ever been loved. So you could talk a little bit to writers and main players. I think you would go and meet the producer every 6 months or so. Main players probably do discuss storylines more than subsidiary characters. But I would ask, if there was something I really felt she wouldn't do, you can have a word with the script editors. But often they're very young and they don't have much power, and they might relay the message back. But often very little changes, because it's written so much in advance. It's hot, and it's interlocked. It's interlocked with other storylines, so they can't change a great deal.
Do you miss it?
I miss my family. I miss the actors. I miss some of the workers there. At the moment, I'm having a fascinating year, and I'm doing all sorts of things I've never done before. So I don't miss the work at the moment. And I'm being very lucky. I'm in Midsummer Murders now. So instead of a Rialto, I drive a Jag, a convertible Jag. So it's not all bad.
And what do you hope people will say about you and your work in the future? What do you want to be remembered for? What's the legacy you'd like to leave?
Oh, dear. We liked her, didn't we? Whatever. What's her name? Whatever happened to, her? That one.
So imagine now, you've obviously heard Desert Island Discs in the past. I've done my own little version, which is similar to Desert Island Disc. But what we'll do is, instead of stranding you on an island, we'll strand you on tour in Whitley Bay. What would be the album that you would take with you?
Oh, Bach.
Any particular concerto?
Brandenburg concertos. When I go into the fiery furnace, I want Brandenburg Concerto number 3 because it's like a dance, and it's jazz as well. He's just amazing. So,
and the film. What would be the film that you would take
Some
with you?
Like It Hot.
Oh, wonderful!
Never
Woman
a
after my own
doubt
heart.
about that. Just, she's sexy. They're funny. It's just fabulous, 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 funny, glorious stuff.
What would be the book? And I know you read a lot.
I don't know at the moment what I would... I'm trying to read Doris Lessing at the moment, but her autobiography, and I have to keep putting it down for other things. So I would take that and relish. She's just ahead of me in autobiography. You know, she was in a world that I inherited, but it's fascinating to know why things came about.
I remember a book she wrote as a child.
The Grass is Singing.
No, The Fifth Child.
Oh, yes. Yes,
Dark
scary,
book.
scary,
Really
scary.
terrifying
Yes.
book. I remember reading that as a boy.
Right.
We
Well,
were
I was a
saying-
grown woman when I read it. But yes, it is terrifying.
Beautiful book, though.
Yes.
Beautiful book. That's one of my recommendations as well. What would be the musical? Any particular musical that you would take with you, or would you?
I love Sondheim.
Me too.
So Company, maybe, where I started with him, I guess. But I just adore him. I love the lyrics and his understanding of human beings. So it would have to be Sondheim.
And a luxury item, anything whatsoever, what would you take with you?
Ooh. Exfoliating scrubby gloves.
For the washing up?
No, for in the shower, so I'm all smooth and lovely when I come out.
Well, over the past few weeks, and this is the final challenge. This is my favourite challenge that I'm getting everybody to do.
Yes.
It's quite manic. Over the past few weeks, I've been collecting and conjuring up the most random, bizarre, outrageous, inappropriate questions I can possibly come up with to deliver to my special guests over rapid fire of 5 minutes. Now, you have
5
to...
minutes?
5 minutes. And it's known as...
I need coffee.
But you've got a lovely Americano in your hands, so stop moaning. So you are allowed to have 3 passes. But this is the game that I like to call Funny 5 Minutes. What is the best gift you've ever received?
Champagne.
Champagne. And the best gift you've ever given?
Champagne.
What is the most expensive thing you've ever bought?
Probably a Mulberry handbag.
I haven't seen that.
I daren't take it out. It's so expensive.
It's clearly still in its cellophane somewhere.
It's in a nice little bag.
If a handbag.
A handbag.
If you were a superhero, what would be your superpower?
Oh, teleportation.
Cats or dogs?
Cats.
Very good answer. Very good answer.
I grew up with dogs, but I'm sorry, cats.
If someone were to narrate your life, who would it be?
Ooh, Stephen Fry.
Oh, and he's available. I'll give you his number.
He's very good at that sort of thing.
Very, very expensive as well. What is the filthiest?
I know him. We might do a deal.
What's the filthiest joke you know?
I don't know any filthy jokes.
Are you taking
I'm
that?
a very clean girl.
We'll see about that when the microphone gets turned off.
That-
Are we going to treat that as a pass?
Okay.
Pass. Okay. Who would play you, and it can't be you, in a movie about your life?
Pauline Quirk.
I thought you were going to say Imelda Staunton. I was sure. Who I know's a mate. Who was your teenage crush?
Ian McShane.
That voice. That amazing voice. If you were sentenced to death row in real life, what would be your last meal?
Fruit and cheese.
Fruit and cheese. Good, there's pudding sorted for tonight. Have you ever been abducted by aliens? And by aliens, I mean real aliens, not just something in a Doctor Who script.
Well, I've met a few strange people that have invited me round to tea, but no, I haven't been abducted.
Strange question here. Would you rather fight one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses?
The one large duck, I think.
One large duck. Do you have any desire to swim with sharks?
No.
No one does. It's a stupid thing.
Bottlenose, hammerhead. Those hammerhead sharks.
Bottlenose is dolphins.
Yes,
Very
it is.
different
Well,
to
I
a
thought
shark.
I'd rather do dolphins, and I thought, well, hammerheads might be quite good.
If you had to jump into a swimming pool filled with something other than water, what would it be?
Champagne.
Champagne. Every answer. Champagne. How many pairs of shoes do you own?
Not many. Only about...
70, 80.
No, in the teens.
If you were to order a pizza, what would it be?
Oh, the one with spinach and egg. Florentina.
Florentina. What is your least favourite word?
Begins with C.
I think I can work out what that is, and so can people at home.
And it's not crumble.
Is line dancing cool?
No.
Excellent. Do you think a swan could actually break someone's arm?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
No.
Yeah. If it was very cross, yes.
How do you like your eggs in the morning?
Boiled.
Boiled. Are you an early riser or a night owl?
I'm an early riser.
And what is the most delicious thing you can cook?
Ooh, I cook many delicious things. I'm not sure. I don't know. Pass.
That's a pass. That's our funny 5 minutes over. So it goes by in seconds.
It does. Well, however many 60 times 5 is.
Sadly, that is all the time we have left. Firstly, thank you to my special guest and national treasure. Thank you for giving me your time. The wonderful, who I think should be Dame Annette Badland.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure. It's been fun.
Now, just a few parish notices before we disappear into the ether. This is the third of 3 podcasts that we've released in our first week for you to enjoy, and from now on, there will be a new episode every 2 weeks released on a Monday. Please make sure you hit subscribe because my special guest for the next episode is one of the UK's finest comedians. He has credits spanning West End musicals such as Matilda and Maid in Dagenham to feature films, much-loved TV shows, and those famous orange ads. My next guest for the next show, people, will be the wonderful Mr. Steve First. This podcast is produced by Arian Productions, dedicated to giving opportunities to theatre makers. If you love the podcast or if you can support the work we do, please visit www.arian-productions.com/donate. We've had over 500 downloads since we launched 4 days ago. If everyone just gave us £5, that would make such an enormous difference for theatre makers in the UK via the work that we want to do. Please, just take 2 minutes to help us. We've worked tirelessly to bring you a great show, and we hope to always be able to. Just sling us a few quid. It makes a massive difference. You can also help us by giving us an iTunes review, as that really does help with the algorithms on iTunes. Lastly, if you have any comments, ideas, or things you want to send into the show, perhaps you want to contribute to the platform or you've got an idea for the soapbox, you can reach me on Twitter at Andrew Keats. You can send me an email to info@arian-productions.com, or you can like the Show People page on Facebook at facebook.com/Show People Podcast, where you can join the listeners forum and find out all about all things Show People from me and Annette and everyone involved in the Show People podcast. Until next time, and remember, just be better.
Hey, come in, lad, and I'll do a belly dance for you.